Okay, so we looked at the difference between negligence and neglect. And again, negligence is not doing what a normal, prudent person would do. Malpractice is negligence by a professional person, not doing what other people would do up to that level of training to their standards of care. Neglect is not giving proper care, not feeding, sheltering, clothing someone. Financial abuse is something else that we see a lot in our elderly population. Many times the financial abuse, and I will tell you, when it comes to abuse with residents, most of the time abuse happens with family members. They actually say it's family members and primary caregivers in the home setting where most cases of elder abuse happen. But financial abuse can also happen in the nursing homes and in the hospitals. Taking an elderly person's money, taking their supplies, taking their things from them, because they may not be fully aware of what's going on. That is considered a form of abuse as well. Abandonment is something you want to be very careful with because we don't always think of abandonment as abuse, but it actually is. And that's deserting or leaving a vulnerable adult alone without someone being available for their care. So if you accept a care for a person, so let's say we give you a patient assignment and we give you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones in that room, and you accept the care for that person. You've accepted the assignment to do that care. And now you leave. Let's say you get a phone call, your kid's been hurt, and you just like, oh my gosh, and you just take off. Okay. You never reported off to anyone. You never told anybody you were leaving. So everybody thinks that you're still around doing that care, and nobody's caring for that person during that time. So that is considered abuse. And so failing to report off to a staff member for someone else to assume their care is very dangerous. We actually had a situation one time. I had a nursing student or CNA student, and we were at the facility, and she got really upset. She had her patient assignment, and the RN came in and chewed her out for something. I don't even really remember exactly what, and she was upset and she was crying. So she just left. She took off. And her partner was looking for her, the regular CNAs were looking for her. She just left the facility. That is abandonment, and that is grounds for termination. So you always make sure if something happens where you have to leave unexpectedly, that, well, as a student, you need to make sure you're telling the instructor. But if you're there because you just got a job as a CNA at a facility and something has happened and you have to leave, you have to make sure you report off to give that care to another person. And it needs to be someone you shouldn't just doing it to another CNA. You need to go to the person up above you, which would be the nurse. Other types of abuse that we see: involuntary seclusion. Keeping someone confined where they don't want to be. So let's say you're in the activities room and you have a patient who's getting agitated and yelling and crying out in the activity room, and it's disrupting the other people. It's okay to take that person out, maybe change their scenery, take them outside, take them out for a little walk, but you decide you're going to lock them in their room. And they don't want to be in the room, but that's where you're going to lock them into it. That would be involuntary seclusion. So it is okay when a patient is agitated, when they're upsetting all the other people around them, it is okay to take a person from one area and move them to another where they can have a change of scenery, maybe calm down a little bit, but to lock them up in their bathroom, lock them up in their room is not okay. Social abuse you see with controlling relationships. We don't really see that so much in a nursing home setting, but you will see that in a home care setting sometimes where let's say that the elderly person who's being cared for at home, the family members aren't allowing any friends to come over because they're, maybe not giving the full care that they're supposed to. So they don't let anybody come visit or don't let the elder person talk to anybody anymore. Child abuse, of course, we think of elder abuse is abuse to our elder population, usually over the age of 65, where child abuse is going to be, of course, care to a child that's not being done. We are mandated reporters, and we are going to be talking a lot about this We are going to be looking at a movie called Our Duty to Report, and we're going to go over some things in our orientation packets for the facilities that they require us to talk to you about. But all healthcare providers are mandated reporters. We must report actual or suspected abuse. Actual or suspected. So one of the things we'll be learning is so let's say we're taking care of our resident and we're noticing bruises that don't look quite right and that are in an area that they probably were thinking, how did they even get those there? We are seeing that their care isn't being done properly, that they're not being fed, that they're not being cleaned. We would need to report that, okay, if we have reason to suspect abuse. We don't have to be able to prove it. If we reasonably suspect it, we actually think that it's possibly happening, we need to report it. Now, let's say the person tells us that they're being abused. So you're taking care of Mr. Smith, and he tells you, that night nurse is mean to me. Every time she comes in, she hits me, she takes my things, she, does all these things. Even though we don't see any evidence of it, we didn't witness it, the person told us that, we have to go ahead and report it. Now, the one time we don't have to report, which we'll talk about, is if we have a patient, let's say you have a patient who has dementia and they don't have cognitive function and they're telling you, oh, everybody's hitting me, everybody's hurting me, everybody's mean to me, everybody's doing this to me, and you see no signs to support that. And they don't have cognitive function or, the mental capacity to rationalize and to fully understand what's happening. That is the one time that we don't have to report it to the ombudsman or the police, but we do want to make sure we pass it up our chain of command, to the nurse, to the facility. When we report signs of abuse or have to do mandated reporting, reports are confidential. Now, I say that sometimes they can kind of figure out where it's coming from, but generally reports are considered confidential. If you do not report abuse, you can be charged with a misdemeanor punishable by a fine or jail or both. So all healthcare providers, RNs, LVNs, CNAs, physical therapy, the maintenance staff, the housekeepers, everybody is required to report abuse in the healthcare setting. So when we report, we may contact the law enforcement or in nursing homes, the ombudsman, which in the California Department of Public Health if we chose to. But it's usually law enforcement or the ombudsman. Now, I mentioned that ombudsman was a person who is there to make sure the residents' rights are being met. It is a volunteer position. They don't get paid. They're not paid by the nursing home. They're not paid by the state. It's a volunteer position. These people take a class in how to be an ombudsman, how to make sure that they're facilitating patients' rights. They help mediate issues and problems between patients and facilities. But all facilities will have an ombudsman available to them, and anybody in that who goes into that nursing home can contact the ombudsman. So our mandated reporting is going to be to the ombudsman or the law enforcement. Now, facilities usually also have a abuse facilitator, I guess, as well. And so they will tell you the policy of the facility is going to be that you always report to the abuse facilitator. And usually it's an administrative capacity. But that doesn't mean you don't have to report it to anyone else. And if you're suspecting abuse and the facility says, oh, well, we'll check into it. If we think it's abuse, we'll go ahead and report it. That's not okay. You legally have a duty to report suspected abuse. Now, if you report abuse and you do it in good faith, you're not doing it to try to get someone in trouble. You're not trying to do it to be mean to another person. You do it because you actually genuinely suspect it. Even if they find out that it's not abuse, they cannot do any action against you. They cannot punish you for it anyway. The facility cannot fire you for it. That is also the law. So we will stop there, and then we will be looking at our abuse video.